You're hauling a cart of manure to the fields at dawn, barefoot because shoes are a luxury you've never owned. Your hands are permanently stained brown from soil, your back bent from work that started before you could walk steady. The morning mist clings to the barley fields like a burial shroud, and crows circle overhead, more than usual. The air smells of wet earth and something else, something faintly sweet and wrong. This is Lord Ashford's manor in Somerset, England. The year is 1348. And you are a villain, legally bound to this land, like the stones are bound to the earth. You cannot marry, move, or sell a chicken without Lord Ashford's permission. Your family has worked these 387 acres for 7 generations, owing 3 days of labor per week, plus extra during harvest. In return, you get a 1-room cottage and the privilege of not starving. You own exactly 3 possessions: a wooden spoon, a threadbare blanket, and a small cross your mother carved from oak. But this morning is different. Father returned from the market town yesterday with strange news. An entire village, 40 miles east, went silent. No one answers when travelers call. The livestock wander free, untended. You don't think much of it until the merchant's cart limps into the village at midday. The driver is slumped over, shaking with fever that makes his teeth clack like stones in a jar. When the village reeve approaches, the merchant lifts his shirt. His armpit is swollen to the size of an apple, black and oozing like rotted fruit. He whispers one word through cracked lips: pestilence. Then he collapses face first into the mud and dies before Father Benedict can administer last rites. Lord Ashford orders the body burned immediately. He forbids anyone from leaving the village. A quarantine enforced by his armed guards, but it's too late. 3 days later, the blacksmith's wife develops a fever. Then, the miller's twin sons. Then, your mother. She burns with heat you can feel from across the room. The buboes appear in her neck, hard lumps that turn purple, then black as spoiled meat. She speaks in tongues, convinced demons are devouring her from inside. Father Benedict bleeds her with leeches, following the ancient medical wisdom that her humors are imbalanced. Too much black bile corrupting her blood. It does nothing. She dies on the 5th day, her fingers blackened like charcoal. Her last words a scream for God to end the pain. You dig her grave in the churchyard. It's the 14th this week. The church bell tolls constantly now, the death knell that in normal times rings once per death. Now, it never stops. The sound becomes like breathing. You no longer notice it. Father Benedict organizes prayer vigils, claiming the plague is God's punishment for sin. Lord Ashford locks himself in the manor with his family and armed guards. While others pray, you make a choice. You start digging graves. Someone has to. The plague follows a brutal pattern. First the fever, then the swellings in neck, armpits, or groin that grow to the size of eggs. Then delirium. Then the blackening of extremities as flesh dies while the heart still beats. Death usually comes within 5 days. Some victims develop a cough that sprays blood like red mist. Those die faster, within hours, drowning in their own lungs. The smell arrives next. Rotting flesh mixed with the frankincense Father Benedict burns to purify the air. It doesn't work. The stench seeps into everything. Your clothes, your hair, the back of your throat. The streets empty except for the sick crawling toward the church, leaving trails of bloody vomit on the cobblestones like the tracks of dying snail. Your father dies. Then, your younger sister, her small body light as kindling when you carry her to the pit. You're alone now, but you're not unique. Half the village is orphaned. The reeve dies. The bailiff flees to London, though he'll die there because the cities are worse. Packed bodies accelerating the contagion. Lord Ashford remains barricaded in his manor while his subjects perish outside his walls. Food production stops. No one plants the summer crops because no one expects to live to harvest them. The few survivors are too weak or too terrified to work. Pigs root through abandoned cottages, feasting on whatever they find. Dogs go feral, fighting over corpses in the streets, their muzzles stained red. The village population drops from 217 souls to maybe 80 by July. The church can't keep up with the dead. Father Benedict, exhausted and desperate, begins conducting mass burials. 30 bodies in a single pit with no individual rights. This is heresy by church law, but God seems not to care. You pass a cottage where an entire family lies dead in their bed, bloated and purple and crawling with flies. They died so fast, no one discovered covered them for a week. You have to burn the cottage to stop the smell. In August, Lord Ashford, speaking from his barricaded window like a man addressing prisoners, makes a proclamation. He will pay 2 pence per corpse to anyone willing to collect the dead. 2 pence! More than you'd earn in a week of farm labor. The work is cursed, unholy. But you're starving, and the dead don't need their coins. You volunteer. So do 5 others. The desperate, the orphaned, the half-mad. You're given a wooden cart, leather gloves, and vinegar-soaked cloth to tie over your face. It doesn't help. Your job is simple. Go house to house, collect the corpses, haul them to the mass graves outside the village. The first body you collect is the baker's daughter. You remember her smile, her kindness when she'd slip you an extra piece of bread. Now, she's a bloated, blackened thing that leaks fluids when you lift her. You vomit into the gutter, your stomach heaving until there's nothing left. Then, you load her onto the cart because you need the money. You develop a system. Knock first, wait for an answer. If none, enter. Drag the bodies out by the ankles. Don't look at their faces. Stack them in the cart like firewood. Dump them in the pit. Collect your pence from Lord Ashford's steward, who counts the coins through a barred window, never touching your hand, as if poverty itself might be contagious. The mass grave outside the village grows to a pit 20 feet wide and 10 feet deep, filled with hundreds of bodies in various stages of decay. Lime is poured over them to slow the rot. The pit smokes in the rain like some entrance to hell. You try not to think about the fact that your entire family is in there somewhere, mixed with strangers, unshriven and unmourned. In September, a traveling friar arrives, preaching that the plague is punishment for tolerating heretics and Jews. The village has no Jews, but there's old Mary, the midwife who knows herbs and charms. A mob drags her from her cottage, accusing her of witchcraft, of poisoning wells. They burn her alive in the town square while she screams prayers that go unanswered. The plague doesn't stop. If anything, it accelerates. The friar himself develops buboes within a week and dies screaming that the devil has claimed him, that his flagellation and prayers meant nothing. You watch this and feel nothing. Numbness has replaced horror. You've seen too much death. Your emotions have cauterized like a burn wound. Nerve endings destroyed beyond repair. The flagellants arrive next. Religious zealots who whip themselves bloody, believing pain will appease God's wrath. They march through the village in procession, their backs shredded to raw meat, chanting prayers in Latin that echo off the empty houses. Within days, half of them are dead. The plague doesn't discriminate between sinner and saint, between the faithful and the damned. Father Benedict dies in October, buboes on his neck like obscene jewelry, cursing God with his final breath for abandoning his flock. You're the one who drags his body to the pit, this man who baptized you, who taught you the Lord's Prayer. You dump him in with the others and collect your 2 pence. You're collecting bodies in the Manor District when you enter a merchant's house and find him dead in his counting room, surrounded by chests of gold coin, enough money to buy your freedom 100 times over. The door is barred from the inside. No one knows you're here. You take the gold, not all of it, enough to look like looters took it, not you specifically. You hide the coins in your cottage, beneath the floorboards where your mother used to hide her few precious things. Then you take more. From corpses, their pockets still heavy with the wages they'll never spend. From abandoned home. From the church collection box. Now that Father Benedict is dead, and God clearly isn't watching, you're not the only one. The other collectors are looting too. The village constable is dead, so there's no law. Morality has collapsed, along with everything else. Survival is the only ethic that matters. The only commandment still enforced. You tell yourself the dead don't need wealth. But at night, you dream of their accusing eyes, their skeletal fingers pointing at you from the pit. The plague burns itself out in December, like a wildfire that runs out of fuel. Not because it's gone, but because there's almost no one left to kill. Of the village's 217 original inhabitants, 71 survive. Lord Ashford and his entire family are dead. The manor guards abandoned them when the food ran out, and the plague slipped through the barricades like smoke through cracks. You stand in the church, the one place you've avoided for months. The pews are empty. The altar is bare because you looted the silver candlesticks last month. Father Benedict's body still lies before the crucifix, mummified in the winter cold, because no one bothered to move it. You realize you're alone in a dead world. You have gold hidden beneath your floorboards. You're free because Lord Ashford's heir never arrived, and no one knows or cares about medieval labor laws anymore. But what's the point of freedom in a graveyard? The winter of 1348 is brutal. Crops weren't planted. Livestock is mostly dead or feral. The surviving villagers huddle in their homes, burning furniture for warmth, rationing moldy grain. Some whisper about cannibalism in the cities. You don't investigate. Spring arrives in 1349. The plague is gone, either exhausted or satisfied with its harvest. The 71 survivors emerge from their cottages like ghosts, blinking in the sunlight that seems too bright, too cheerful for this charnel house. A new lord arrives in June, Lord Ashford's distant nephew from London. He expects to rule as his uncle did, to reimpose the old laws, to demand labor and taxes from the surviving serfs. He gathers you all in the church ruins and makes a proclamation, his voice echoing in the empty space. You will return to work. The harvest must be brought in. The old order is restored. The survivors look at each other. There are 71 of you and one of him. The plague killed roughly half of Europe's population. Historians would later calculate nearly 50 million people. There aren't enough workers left. And you know something he doesn't. Scarcity creates power. You step forward. You're wearing the dead merchant's fine wool cloak now, your pockets heavy with looted gold. You speak words that would have been treason a year ago, words that would have earned you a noose. No. The other survivors murmur agreement. The new lord threatens force, but his guards are dead too. He threatens imprisonment, but there's no one to enforce it. He threatens damnation, but the plague proved God doesn't listen to threats or prayers or bargains. Finally, desperate, he offers a compromise. Wages, real wages, paid in coin for voluntary labor. This is the world historical shift that textbooks will later describe in dry academic language. The feudal system, which survived for centuries through violence and tradition, shatters in a single generation because there simply aren't enough peasants left. You negotiate a contract, 3 pence per day, plus food, plus the right to leave if you choose. In the old world, such a contract would be heresy. In the new world, it's survival. Across England, authorities will desperately try to cap wages and prevent peasant mobility through laws like the Statute of Laborers in 1351. They will fail. The workers have leverage now, for the first time in 1,000 years. Within 2 generations, serfdom will effectively end in Western Europe. Not through revolution, but through depopulation. You're older now, working a small farm you purchased with your plague gold. You never married because there are too many ghosts. You employ 2 workers at fair wages, which would have been unthinkable before. You're not wealthy, but you're free. Your grandparents were bonded serfs who died knowing only servitude. You're a landowner. The plague was the greatest catastrophe in European history. It killed your family, destroyed your world, turned you into a corpse collector who looted the dead. It traumatized an entire civilization. And yet it broke the chains that bound your ancestors for 1,000 years. The Black Death ended feudalism. The graveyards became the foundation of economic freedom. You visit the mass grave sometimes, now overgrown with wildflowers that bloom yellow and white in the spring. Somewhere in that pit are your mother, your father, your sister. You wonder if they'd consider the cost worth the freedom. You wonder if freedom built on 50 million corpses can ever be called liberation. You never find an answer. The manor is abandoned now, windows empty like eye sockets, vines crawling up the stone walls. The fields you once worked for nothing are now worked by free men and women who negotiate their wages and move between employers. The world survived, changed beyond recognition. And you survived with it, carrying the weight of everyone who didn't. The story you just experienced is based on documented historical patterns from the Black Death of 1347 to 1353. While this specific character is fictional, millions lived through exactly this nightmare. Contemporary chronicles describe corpse collectors, mass graves, social collapse, and the paradoxical economic liberation that followed depopulation. The plague killed roughly half of Europe's population and fundamentally restructured medieval society. The survivors inherited a world with higher wages, more mobility, and the beginning of the end of feudalism. But that freedom was purchased with unimaginable suffering. Every time you read about the rise of the middle class or the end of serfdom, remember, it was built on the largest mass grave in Western history. History's turning points are often written in blood, and the people who lived through them rarely saw themselves as part of a grand narrative. They were just trying to survive one more day. Drop a comment about how you think you'd respond in their situation, and subscribe, because we've got more journeys through history's darkest hours coming your way.